Hello. Last week you received a general introduction on what is history and what do historians do. Welcome to week 2 of MH510. I am Dr. James Deitch. A little bit about my background. When I retired from the Marine Corps, I went into industry in the civilian world, and later in my career decided that I wanted to return and get a second degree in military history. I found Norwich to be an excellent choice for my needs, and very much stand by that to this day. Afterwards, I went on to achieve a professional certificate in early American history and ultimately received my doctoral degree from Liberty University in intellectual history last year. This week, the class will discover historiography and learn about sources. And I can't stress to you enough how important learning historiography this early in the program will be to your success in the program. We will deal with historiography, and it's a big and maybe intimidating word, but I need for you to focus on asking as many questions and achieving that understanding of the difference between historicism and historiography as early as you possibly can. This week and this class may be one of the most essential things that you will learn during this program. In this week's discussion, we'll start by demystifying historiography as a word and a concept. As a quick introduction, historiography examines how historians have explored a topic from a variety of perspectives and approaches over time. Historians frequently disagree about how to interpret the events they study, and they use different methodologies to explain the past. The questions that historians have asked and the methodologies that they have used to explore history have changed over time. Certain interpretations take hold during a particular place and time. They're influenced by the context of the time, and we refer to these interpretive frameworks as schools of thought. Historiography compares, contrasts, and evaluates two or more historians writing on the same subject over a period of time. You will learn about these historiographic schools of thought and develop skills to identify them, discover where your ideas fit, and practice writing your own historiographic overviews. Also this week, we will explore how and why historians have interpreted the past the way they did. All historians are affected by the historical context in which they live. Historians have biases. Those biases stem from the events from their lifetime. Those biases are not necessarily problems. You just need to identify them and understand them. And not only understand those of the historians you're studying, but those that you possess yourself. Here is in my mind, a great example of how context affects how one writes about the past. During the Vietnam War, scholars studied and wrote about guerrilla warfare, insurgency, and counterinsurgency. Now, after the end of the war, historians turned to other topics of study, largely ignoring the subject of Vietnam for the next 30 years. Then September 11th happened. The terrorist attacks consumed historians for a little bit. The U.S. had invaded Afghanistan and then Iraq. And in both places, troops faced insurgencies. At the time these events were happening, there was a sweeping uptick in interest in publications on guerrilla warfare, insurgency, and counterinsurgency operations. Historical context shaped what topics historians chose to study. So next we will turn to primary and secondary sources. The relationship is this. Primary sources are the evidence for secondary sources. Primary sources are materials produced by people or groups that are either directly involved in the event as participants, witnesses, or observers. Some primary sources are written, such as letters, diaries, newspapers, memoirs, census data, military orders, and even government reports. Some are oral accounts, captured in writing or visual or audio media, such as interviews, speeches, or sermons. Works of art, films, music, clothing, uniforms, household objects, tools, weapons, military equipment, and archaeological remains are all primary sources as well. So where can we find some of these? Libraries, battlefields, museums, all of those contain these. In addition, don't count out the military themselves. Taking oral histories has become a growing trend and interest. It was very rare in the past to be able to have them. Now there is an active effort for living veterans to capture as much oral histories as they possibly can, and you'll find those from a variety of sources. Now, returning to primary sources, historians use primary sources as the evidence to write their own accounts. Primary sources are evidence. They were used by historians to write their accounts about the past. These accounts are called secondary sources or secondary hand accounts. They might be written a few years after the event or a few centuries after the event. Most of the books and articles you will read in your master's program are secondary sources. There are also tertiary sources. These summarize secondary sources. So these are going to be encyclopedias, dictionaries, and textbooks. These will give you broader ideas and allow you to search for areas of interest. A research process might start with a tertiary source to learn the basic facts of an event so that you may formulate a research question on the subject. Remember that. You've got to formulate a research question to begin this process. The next step is to identify the historiography of that subject, of that topic. These are easy to do with search engines and using various queries to find out what sources are available on any of those subjects. You want to identify what have other historians written about the subject, where do they agree or disagree? Essential. Where do they agree or disagree on the subject? Are there unexplored areas? Can you think of questions that have not been asked on that subject? And then, and only then, will you identify your primary sources and you'll begin collecting the evidence from as many different perspectives as possible. Primary sources may conflict with each other, so they need to be evaluated for internal inconsistencies, contradictions, or bias. Information must be corroborated. And finally, you can interpret your sources and draw your own conclusions. Historiography is part of the process of writing history. You must understand how and why others wrote history in the past. Then you will be able to draw on the body of knowledge to write your own secondary source history using primary sources in your capstone paper or thesis in your final course. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you today, and I wish you luck as you progress through the course.